Now, before we dive in, must disclaim that the information presented in this webinar is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal advice. So please consult with a qualified legal professional for guidance on any specific legal matter. Now, without further ado, I'll hand over the virtual stage to Adam, founder of Weissman Law, who will introduce himself and kick off today's discussion. So Adam, if you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Lorena. So for those of you that are familiar with our firm, Weissman Law, you would know that we do not touch immigration issues whatsoever. We're a transactional firm that mostly focuses on working with artists and brands on contracts and corporate matters and IP issues. But I will say that we work with a lot of artists and a lot of companies that are based overseas but are coming to do work in the US. So of course, one of the most important things when working with any of those clients is making sure that they're actually able to do the work here in the first place, because if they can't have the authority to work here, we can't help them at all with our stuff. So with that, it's always helpful to know a really good immigration lawyer. And speaking of good immigration lawyers, I'd like to introduce everyone to my friend, Jacki Granet, one of the two partners of Granet, Blaker. We met about a year ago on another panel and had the pleasure of keeping in touch since. Jacki works with a ton of creatives and is a fantastic resource when we have questions, but more importantly, is a fantastic resource for our clients when they need help. So with that, I'm going to start by just turning the floor to Jacki for any preliminary question or preliminary remarks you'd like to make. And then after that, we're going to dive into questions. And I will say, we are streaming this simultaneously on Zoom and on LinkedIn. If you have any questions throughout, as Lorena mentioned, we'll be answering them towards the end, but please type them in the chat now so we can start piling those up and reading through them. Jacki, please take it away.
Hi, everyone. It's very nice to meet all of you. My name is Jacki, and I want to first thank Adam and Lorena for having me today. As Adam said, I am a partner at my own law firm, Blaker Granet, along with my partner, Stephen Blaker. And I just want to sort of start off by clarifying the work that we do handle and the questions and commentary I'm able to make today and what I don't handle, which is, our firm handles about 80% business immigration. We do the full gamut of business immigration. So while I may focus on the creative arts industries, my partner focuses on more tech, engineering, sort of general business and investor type of companies. So we are able to handle all of that. Plus, we do work on marriage-based green cards, family-based green cards, and naturalization to become a U.S. citizen, which we've seen quite a nice uptick in the last few months, which has been very nice. What we do not handle and what I won't be talking about today is any asylum work or deportation defense or U visas, T visas, anything that's sort of on the more humanitarian side of immigration. So I just wanted to introduce myself. It's wonderful to be here today, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Jacki. So with that said, before we get into the really specific stuff, I think I'd like to ask a little bit of some broader questions, maybe a bit of an overview to understand the temperature of the things that we're going into with these questions today. So in light of some of the recent shifts in immigration policy, the change in president's office in the last few months, would love to hear sort of an overview of the challenges you've seen creative professionals face most frequently when seeking entry into the U.S.
Sure. So I would say there are various steps to the immigration process. And typically one of the first steps, particularly for creative individuals, is the compiling and filing of a petition here in the U.S. And again, most of the time for creative professionals, that will be the O1 Extraordinary Ability or Achievement petition. And in Trump, what we are calling Trump 2.0, there hasn't been a big change in terms of the adjudication of the petition itself. I haven't seen pushback necessarily on any, really niche or weird things in a petition. During Trump 1.0, there was definitely some pushback about just explaining things a little, one step further. So, for example, I once got a request for more evidence asking me to explain why a director of a film is a leading role on a film. So, I mean, to me, that seems like pretty obvious. But from that point on, what we did was we started including a lot of context evidence in our petitions, third-party articles that blanketly talk about the importance of a director on a film set. So in terms of the petition, not a lot of change currently. The part where we see more change happening currently is sort of with the visa issuance. So if and when a petition is approved, then most people have to apply for a visa stamp and then enter the US. So there is some more strict review in that respect of the visa issuance. And then, of course, I'm sure we'll talk more about travel into the US as we go through the panel, but entering the US is definitely a hot topic right now, and we'll talk about it more in depth. But I would say the bigger changes for creatives have been with visa issuance and with entry to the US.
Got it. Okay. Definitely have questions about that, but let's pepper them into the specifics as we dive into it. So let's now go more into the specifics, talking about types of visas that creative professionals and artists are going to get. I know the one that I keep hearing about and have seen a lot of my clients use before is the O1 visa. I'm also familiar with the P1 visa. Would love to understand just a really brief overview of what those are, how they differ, and then what types of things clients should be doing when they're building up their portfolio to make those arguments to get those visas.
Sure. So I would say the number one piece of advice that I give to a client who wants to build towards an O1 or a specific type of visa is immediately open like a Google Drive folder or a folder on your desktop, and just anytime you're mentioned any piece of press, if it's a hard copy, you're scanning it and saving it. If it's a link, you're printing a PDF version of it and just compiling it, because O1s require extensive documentation. Before everyone hopped on, Lorena asked if I work from home, and I said I really can't, because most of our petitions, they probably start at 300 pages and they go up to 900 if needed. So we need an industrial grade printer and we have to file on paper. So that means the client is required to provide quite a bit of extensive documentation. So if you sign a contract to be the new face of a brand, save that contract, because that's great evidence to include in a petition. And it's much more difficult to sort of gather your thoughts when you have documents here, there, everywhere, like, oh, I think my lawyer has that, I don't think I ever got it. Like, always ask for everything and save everything. In terms of visa types, as Adam said, O1 is definitely the most popular for creatives. It's extraordinary ability in the arts or extraordinary ability in film and television. It can sometimes be a little confusing or difficult to decipher whether you're going to be in the arts or film and TV. These regulations were written before YouTube existed, before the internet, before TikTok. So one may argue that someone who's a TikTok star would be in the arts because they're performing and they're on video, but it's not really film and TV. Sometimes if a TikTok star has something on their itinerary that's in the film and TV world, then you have to file under film and TV and make that argument. So it's a little difficult to decipher which path to go down. But to get the O1 is a high threshold. You don't need to be Alex Earl to get an O1, even though she's American, but that's the first social media person who popped into my head. You don't need to be that level of successful, but you need to have some level of notoriety. And so you have to be able to show that you have played and will play a leading role on distinguished productions, you have published materials, you earn high salary, you have expert testimony discussing your achievements. So you need to satisfy at least 3 of 6 categories that they delineate, that the government delineates. And then there is something called the O2, which is for essential support personnel. So if the O1 is the most famous person in a TikTok family, let's say, you can have an O2 for the rest of the family, arguing that they are essential to the O1 individual's work and that they have a longstanding professional relationship. And that is a way to build
How would someone, let's say like a member of a film crew, fit in with these visas? What would be the most appropriate there?
An O2, typically. For the O1, every O2 has to be tied to an O1. So an O1 on the project has to exist. I've done many film projects where we did, 1 or 2 or 3 O1s for the high profile cinematographer, director, or actor, and then like 60 plus O2s for, hair, makeup, wardrobe. Some of those professionals are the department heads and can get their own O1, but a lot of them don't rise to the level of an O1, so an O2 is appropriate in that situation. Now, the P1B is for entertainment groups only. It has a lower threshold than the O1, but if let's say you're a singer from London and you're not really what we would call like O1 level yet, you can't just file for the P1B because it's a lower threshold. It's only for entertainment groups. If you perform alongside the same like dancers, then you can make an argument that together you guys are an entertainment group. But the P1 is a lot more narrow in terms of who can take advantage of it. It's also only available for 1 year at a time, whereas the O1 you can request up to 3 years.
So you have to be like a boy band to request that one.
Yes.
Let's kind of on that same gear of prepping for these applications. Can you talk about kind of how to make the decision to choose the right type of lawyer in this space? Because we know there are, like you already addressed at the start, tons of different types of immigration lawyers. And then B, how does a sponsor kind of fit into this whole situation as well?
Sure, of course. So obviously selecting a lawyer for any aspect of your career and your business is a vital part of the work. I would say you definitely want to meet with a few and see who you sort of vibe with, for lack of a better word, and get, other reviews. A lot of my clients come from direct referrals. Hey, you did my friend's visa. He said he really liked working with you. Can you help me? Now, why I would say to still meet with a few people is just to get a sense of, pricing, if that's an issue for you, and also different opinions, because there's no right or wrong in how to prepare the package. There are certain forms that have to be in there, but otherwise I've seen packages or petitions prepared in a variety of different ways. Some I agree with, some I don't. But also whether or not you're eligible for the actual petition, because there are definitely lawyers out there who will be like, yeah, you have enough, I could file for you. And, just the other day I said to someone, you have an O1, but I don't think you're ready for the green card equivalent of the extraordinary ability visa. So here's what I would do to build up towards it. But you could easily find a lawyer who's willing to file that for you and take your money. I won't do that. I like my approval percentage to be high. So I don't, I'll take a borderline case if the client understands, like, I think this could go either way and you understand the risks and you want to try, let's try. But if I'm telling you, I don't think it's approvable, then I want you to go ask other people. And if you find someone who you are comfortable with, who says they can file it, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a personal choice. There's also like people who don't really handle a lot of O1 visas, think that they have like an idea of how to prepare them, but aren't, they're so different from other types of work visas, where like the only evidence you have to show is maybe your degree and your transcripts. So I would definitely try to find people who are specialized in O1s.
Could you tell us the role that a sponsor plays within all of this as well?
Absolutely. So every work visa requires some sort of petitioner. For O1s, typically that's either a direct employer or an agent. So your visa will be tied to these people or these companies. So let's say you have a Disney O1 for a movie that you're Disney. Once you stop filming that and stop working with Disney, you can't just use that, on its face valid O1 visa to do whatever you want in the US in entertainment. It's, assuming it's specific to that Disney project, that's all you're permitted to work on. You can't have concurrent O1s, and a lot of talent do. But the petitioner always comes into play. So if you split with your agent, for example, and they're the petitioner, then you need to file a new petition with your new agent.
Got it. And you already made a reference to this before with YouTube being invented after a lot of these categories were figured out. But could you tell us maybe about some other challenges you've seen content creators and digital performers and what we'll call maybe new media folks dealing with and trying to get over here?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with that space is educating USCIS, which is the organization that oversees and adjudicates the petitions. They, in theory, know the O1 regulations, but they don't know every field, every business, every industry in the world. So it's up to your attorney and the beneficiary, who is the foreign national, or the petitioner sponsoring company, to provide this evidence that explains what this person does and why these certain markers are achievements in the field. Because the regulations are outdated as written. I mean, I always joke that the green card extraordinary ability regulations still ask for commercial success based on cassette tape sales and compact disc sales. So it's on us to explain cassette tapes don't exist at all anymore. Compact discs are very rarely ever purchased. Streaming is the new version of commercial success. And here's why, and here's articles explaining this transition, and here's the exact metrics by which Billboard, certifies certain albums as platinum. So it's the education aspect that has really been the biggest hill to climb with respect to new media, because, to any lay person who doesn't even work in this field at all, and you see like, oh, the person has 500,000 Instagram followers or something, they're like, okay, and whereas like people in the industry might know that's a significant number and here's why. So you have to educate immigration about that.
And you find you're having to sort of restart that whole conversation almost every single time?
I mean, I think I have the conversation down pretty well at this point, but every single petition, I mean, I'm of the mindset where I like to over provide and really explain, because I want to avoid what's called a request for evidence to the extent humanly possible.
Yeah, totally understand that. Now, before we dive into what I'll call the next step of actually showing up here,
Mhm.
do you ever deal with situations where you have an artist traveling to multiple countries at once, let's say for a tour? And does that complicate things? How does that interact with your work? What does that look like?
Absolutely. And how it's definitely more complicated because unless you're Canadian, you need to apply for a visa stamp in your passport. And that's not the same as going to the embassy and they stamp it right there after your interview. That's not what happens. You go to your interview, which lasts like 3 minutes at most. And if approved, you're leaving your passport there. They take it, they facilitate putting in a full page visa like stamp that has your picture and some information on it, and then they send it back to you. Now, sometimes that takes 2-3 days, sometimes it takes 2-3 weeks, and there's not really a way to pay for it to be the fastest possible. You can't do same day. And so you have to really plan, okay, when can I go to the embassy? When can I be without my passport? Or do I live in a country where I can have two passports so I can use one for getting the US visa and continue to travel? In terms of the other parts of the other countries, at my firm, we only handle US immigration law. So I only handle the US arm, but I work with a great number of sort of global team members who can handle visas in other countries. And, I think the US is probably the longest process, because it has the petition part, then the visa stamp part, and then entering, where a lot of other places are you just kind of apply for a visa with like one letter or something. But I have great resources. I always say if anyone has any immigration questions, you can always feel free to reach out to me. If I can't handle it directly, I know someone who can.
Great. Okay, so let's turn to getting past the paperwork. You're planning your trip in. Pick a country, pick a place that they're coming from into the US. Can you tell us sort of the hurdles and obstacles and what you as an artist, someone under one of these visas should be doing to prep for your actual entry?
Sure. anyone coming, before they go to their interview for the visa stamp, to even go to that part, should review their entire petition. They should know what was written about them. They should know what was highlighted, what was maybe not discussed, what was how it was structured, what the agreement with your company says, to make sure that you're not saying, oh, my petitioner is CAA, and then you're talking about CAA like they're your employer, where that's not true. They're your agent. The employers are the various production companies. So you should really understand your petition before you're even going to the visa stamp interview. And I will say what's sort of not easily understood by most people is that you're sort of vulnerable at a variety of different stages of the process. Meaning, when you file a petition, it's not just part of the process. You have to be approved for it. And people do get denied because immigration doesn't think you meet the standards for an O1. So you have to really prepare a strong application. So if and when that's approved and you go apply for the visa stamp is not an automatic issuance of your visa stamp. That's when they're doing your background checks. That's when they're asking you about even a petty arrest 10 years ago. That's when they're asking like, oh, you've been to these countries where, they might be on a watch list for the US. What were you doing there? It's not an automatic grant of a visa stamp. So you should really be prepared for your visa stamp interview, even though it will take 90 seconds to 3 minutes total. They're getting you in and out of there. And then if and when the visa stamp is issued to you, you're not guaranteed entry to the US because you have that visa stamp. Every time you're coming to the US, you're requesting admission to the US. So if you got arrested between the time you got the visa stamp and you were coming to the US, that could be a reason. If they search your phone, which they're allowed to do, and something really bad comes up, maybe you've showing yourself using drugs on your social media or something like that, that could be a reason you're not let in the country. So nothing is guaranteed in the process, even up until when you're arriving in the US.
And you as their attorney, let's say they're going for the stamp or they're actually trying to get physical entry. Is there a point where you're actually getting involved in those steps, or you can intervene at all?
So yeah, I'll have prep calls before for visa stamp interviews to make sure that they understand their petition, make sure that they understand what was filed on their behalf. I haven't really had a lot of prep calls before entry to the US. I've been very lucky. I'm knocking on wood. I haven't had any issues yet with my clients entering the US. But it's important to know, to be able to speak about your work. Really, that's the biggest thing, is when you go to that visa stamp interview, they're going to say, okay, what are you known for? What work are you doing in the US? You need to be able to know what was on your itinerary or what your agreement says. And I always let my clients know, I'm like, this is your time you get to brag and not feel bad about it, because they want to hear you talk about why you're eligible for an O1.
What sorts of best practices would you be advising to clients just in terms of getting ready for getting to the border, things like that, beyond just obviously knowing their CV and their list of what they've done? Like, how should they be approaching the conversation? Is there anything they should be keeping in the back of their mind? Or more importantly, maybe is there anything they shouldn't be doing either beforehand or when they're actually there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one we say is, make sure you know your petition, make sure you have your passport is still hasn't expired, your visa stamp is still has not expired. When you go in, only answer the questions that you're directly asked. Don't feel the need to like go on and on and on, which could, elicit some further questioning. A lot of people have been talking about the whole cell phone of it all. What they're looking for on your phone is, right now it seems like they're looking for, are you posting pro-Palestine social media posts? Did you post things that might be legal in your country to do, but aren't legal in the US? The biggest thing with content creators also is, are you posting that you're working in the US before you had the work visa? And I've posted about this on LinkedIn a few times because there's so much misinformation out there about it. If you're coming into the US to work for even one day, you need a work visa. If you're coming into the US to work, but you're getting paid by a foreign company, you still need a work visa. Immigration cares about where you're doing the productive work. So if I am a British influencer and I come in as a visitor and I go to Coachella and then I hashtag like ASOS partner, hashtag ad, like thanks for sending me greatest weekend ever, that was you working. That is, they're looking for unauthorized work. So don't do it, but then don't post about it if you have done it.
So that sounds like a pretty clear distinction that you can make. Like if you're being paid to actually promote something while you're in the US, you're working there, right? And that's
Yeah.
pretty obvious. But let's say, for example, what if I'm a UK-based food influencer and I have a trip to LA and I just happen to record myself at a bunch of restaurants that I'm at for the purposes of collecting video that I'm then going to then use back in the UK to post about my trip, not being paid by anybody to do it, but it obviously is going on this feed, which does have paid posts.
Yeah.
Where do you think that would fall in terms of unauthorized work or not?
I mean, to be frank, it's a very gray area right now. In my mind, that's working because you're going to go back and you're going to post and you're going to get paid for that post through TikTok, right? Or through Instagram or whomever the creator, account. So it might not be sponsored, but it is work. And, I would err on the side of being a little bit more conservative and pursuing getting a visa and making sure everything is above board, particularly if you travel a lot. So as someone, let's say from London, most of the time they're going to use what's called ESTA to travel as a visitor. You can't use ESTA if you've ever been arrested. You can't use ESTA if you've ever been denied a visa or denied entry, but most people can use ESTA. And that's a simple online form. You fill it out, you get approved 3 days later, or up to 3 days later. So you come in as a visitor and you're granted 90 days every time you enter as a visitor. Now, there's nothing in the law that says you can't then leave at day 85 and then come back a week later and keep doing that. And there's nothing to say you can't come 1 week every month for the next year. It doesn't say you're limited to this many weeks, this many days. That's not a rule. However, what does that look like to the officer when you're doing that? If you're coming in for 2.5 months, leaving and trying to come back, they're going to ask you, what are you doing in the US? It looks like you're living here. If you just left and you're coming back, you were here for 2.5 months. How did you afford to support yourself during that time if you're not working? Because you're not allowed to work because you're a visitor. And so it quickly becomes a huge issue. And they could say, we don't believe you're not working. You're not let in. And that could be true of people who come for 1 week every month. Because what does that look like? A pattern. Why are you coming for a week every month, the same week or whatever it is? What that looks like you're working to me. That looks like you're engaged with a US entity or something.
And what kind of recourse do you have if you do get denied?
Well, you're sent back and
Yeah.
what the problem is depending on how you're sent back, can affect how the next steps go, but you're always going to have to admit that when you're applying for a visa in the future. So it's going to follow you everywhere. So don't do it.
So really get it right the first time. Hire an attorney is
Yeah,
what
just
I mean.
talk to someone and say like, hey, I've really built this following. I want to do a tour through the US on my TikTok, style of I eat at different pizza places and rate them or whatever. Just take care of it ahead of time. I mean, I know that seems easier said than done, but it's a lot easier to go through the 101 process if eligible than it is to unravel a denied entry and try again and have to start sort of in the negative.
Got it. You already went into a lot of detail about the system not necessarily recognizing current forms of media that have existed for folks like us for a long time, but for folks in the USCIS maybe seems brand new. Any other sort of pain points or areas that you would identify in the immigration system that could use some change that would really help artists and other creatives.
Yeah, I mean, sort of further to your point, I mean, we just saw pushback from immigration about website, because when you argue published materials for the O1 or the green card equivalent, and you're saying like, oh, this person's been in these high profile press pieces, you have to also argue that they are major media or trade publications. So there's, no exact definition of what is major media. Clearly, something like the New York Times would be considered major media, but there's a lot of other things that could be considered major media. Now, we also provide media kits. So if my client has been featured in Variety, I'm always then inputting the Variety's media kit in to show the readership of Variety. Now, sometimes immigration has pushed back and said, media kits are self-serving, we don't trust them. And then you're like, but, oh, okay. And then there are times where they say, okay, well, this online platform, let's say therap.com, it's a page view isn't the same thing as readership because people sometimes accidentally click on that or they don't stay long enough, but there's no judging or there's nothing official about what's considered readership for online sources. So you're having to argue monthly unique visitors or other types of similar metrics. And sometimes immigration accepts it and sometimes they don't. And that's kind of another thing where you could file two identical petitions where one gets approved and one has a request for more evidence. And you're like, I mean, this just happened to me. I just file quite a few petitions for like cinematographers, production designers, makeup artists, etc., for this talent agency. And 18 of the last 19 have been approved, no issue. And the 19th got a request for evidence asking for clarification about the like agreement or the itinerary. And I was like, you just approved 19 other petitions that look exactly like this. But I don't want to point that out in case they want to reopen those files or something.
We deal with a lot of trademark applications, which obviously go through the federal government as well, albeit a different agency. And I can tell you that happens all the time in that context too, where you push something through that in your mind is identical, but you just happen to have a different examiner on the other end,
Yeah.
and they reject it for no perceptible reason or difference. So I feel your pain there. It stinks, but at the end of the day, all you can do is push back with your proper arguments. I do want to open things up to the audience for questions in a minute, but before I do that, I want to kind of leave you with sort of a last word, either message you want to give to the audience overall, or alternatively, if you have any really interesting stories that are anonymized without talking about your clients, now's the time to share them.
I mean, I would say at the end of the day, travel to the US is a personal decision. And I think that the number of people who are being denied entry to the US is not necessarily a new thing. It's just getting a lot more media coverage. And we don't always know all the details for all of the cases that are seeing a lot of media coverage, but it is in the end a personal decision. I mean, you can weigh the pros and cons. If you're not willing to abide rules, then don't come. But if a lot of people are canceling even their vacations here, and I understand there's fear involved. And at the end of the day, it's just a personal decision of whether you decide to make that journey. In terms of stories, I did have one director where she came to me very clearly approvable for an O1A, and she does a lot of music videos. But before she came to me, which is mistake number one, she filmed what would become a very famous music video, but it was so clearly shot on location within the US. It wasn't like something where you could not know where it was shot, like it was indoors or something. Like, no, this was like landmark, landmark everywhere. And so it was typically a project I would have really highlighted in the petition, but instead decided not to talk about it and told her, you're not allowed to do this in the future. Like, you always need to have a visa. And so, a lot of people come with really bad advice. So she was told that, you're not being paid in the US, it's fine. And I had to clarify that for her and also tell her to like be cool about it. Like never lie, but like it normally would be something that you would want to brag about, but I said don't.
Did it work? Did it work out for her in the end?
Yes, yes. That was many years ago, and she's been very successful since, and so I'm really happy for her. But for all of you people out there, like unauthorized work, it's so much easier now with everyone working just from their cell phone and thinking like, I'm not really working, but if this is what you do professionally, you're working. So while you can come to the US as a visitor for business meetings, if you want to come meet with some brands who might be interested in you, you can't work for them until you have a visa.
Great. That is a very important distinction to make. And thank you for dispelling some of those myths, because I certainly have clients saying these things to me, and I'm just like, that doesn't sound right. So it's good to know.
It's a
Now,
lot. Immigration is a lot
yeah,
of, I've done it for so long. No one's ever caught on, or my friend did it without a problem. It's fine. Everyone does it. And you're like, well, okay, I've tried.
look, I think that is the lawyer's limit, regardless of what type of law you practice,
Yeah.
where really, and this is why we do things like this, where we get people like yourself to just talk about these basic things, because none of this is intuitive.
Mhm.
It's not like you're born and suddenly you just understand immigration policy and how to enter into the US,
Yeah.
right? And there's no single resource that's going to lay everything out very simply for you. So it's really just about educating yourself even before you get started with the process, to know that you're not necessarily doing anything wrong. And that goes for immigration, that goes for working on productions and dealing with copyright issues on our end, like anything, you name it. Would love to turn to the audience to ask questions. Not seeing anything in the chat quite yet, so please type those away if you have them. But I know Lorena always has a few extra questions that she's armed with, so I'll let her take the floor and see what she has ready for us.
Okay, well, we haven't received any questions from the audience. Let's see the questions that I had prepared. Um, hmm, okay, so like what resources or support systems do you find most valuable for creatives facing disruptions to their legal immigration pathways?
Talking to me or talking to another immigration lawyer. You can read, there's Reddit threads aplenty, there's online resources, but I don't really trust online forums. I wouldn't if I were a foreign national. I would definitely want to see someone talking to a professional who actually works in this business and works in the field, and not just immigration in general. Like I said at the top of the call, talking to someone who handles these types of visas, because they are very different.
And I will add, going, talk about Reddit threads and whatnot, ChatGPT is probably not your friend in these situations, because they give a lot of incorrect information. It gives a lot of incorrect information. And I know now if you type something on Google, it's the first thing you're going to see pop up is an AI answer. Be really
Yeah.
careful relying on those, because it's very, very easy to discover that if you click the first link underneath it where something was written by a human, everything above it in that AI overview might actually be false. We are getting a couple questions in, so let's start there. We'll start with Michelle's question. How many times can you apply for a visa if you get turned down?
If you're denied,
Correct.
there's no limit. Some people get denied and they immediately want to refile. And most of the time, I like to say, let's take 6 months, let's get some new evidence so that we're not just filing the same exact petition. I like to show immigration that, we heard what they were saying. Whether or not we agree with it is a different story, but we heard, and that we, continued to build up this individual's profile. But you can keep trying. I mean, if you have the funds, but you do have to list, I mean, on the forms, there's a question, have you ever been denied this visa type? And so you'll have to say yes. And then the more times you're denied, the more like suspicious it'll probably look. So, um, you can also get denied on a very small technicality. So if you're able to fix that really quickly, then you can refile immediately. But otherwise, if it's on the merits, then I would definitely wait a little bit.
From a practical perspective, is there ever, a rough number where you're just telling them it's time to stop?
I don't think I've ever filed an O1 for someone who's been denied twice.
Got it. Okay, that's good. All right. So You mentioned before you could go talk to brands, and that wouldn't necessarily you wouldn't necessarily need some sort of authorization to do that. But what about things like auditioning for Broadway or a showcase? Do you need a visa for that?
To audition, no, I would say you don't need a visa for that.
Okay. Let's
But
see.
then
Any other?
that
Yeah,
gets
please.
really difficult because that then goes into the time frame of it all, which is, okay, what if they like you and want to hire you? What's the start date of the project? Because all of the steps that we discussed take time, and you can't change from someone who entered on ESTA as a visitor to O1 from within the US. So if you audition on a Monday and they want you to be in 2 weeks on stage, that timeline is not realistic. So, first you have to gather. That's why I also talk about gathering all your evidence as you go, because it's makes the process a lot quicker because you're able to provide all of that evidence to your client or to your attorney right away. So if it's a Broadway actor, then you have to go get advisory opinions before you file. You would need to get one from Actors Equity. And once you get that, then you can file with USCIS. And the fastest processing right now is 15 business days, which is 3 full weeks. And that's how long they can have to review your petition. So they can either approve it, send a request for more evidence, but even if they approve it, then you have to go apply for a visa stamp. And there are ways to sort of politely request further expedites, but they're not guaranteed. And we're not living in a terribly immigrant-friendly environment right now. So there's less incentive to help out an immigrant. But timing is a huge, huge, huge part of the equation. People have lost jobs because they've been told they can't get a visa in time for the project. So always start on the earliest you can.
We have a question talking about fees and delays on LinkedIn asking, do you ever find that the USCIS fees and delays in the process just outright deter international touring artists or other creatives from coming to the US?
Absolutely. An O1 regular processing right now, which 1 year ago, April 1st, 2024, all the fees went up. Across non-immigrant visas, it used to be that it was $460 for regular processing. And around that time, it was like 2 to 4 months was the processing time. Today, the processing time for regular processing is like 7 to 9 months. And the regular processing fee for an O1 is either $830 or $1,655, depending on how big the petitioner is. So it's more expensive, it's taking longer. The premium processing fee, which gets you a response in 15 business days, is $28.05, and that's per petition. Now for O2s, you can put up to 25 individuals on a single O2 petition. So that's why a lot of people sort of try to utilize that O2 because it's way more cost effective. It used to be unlimited. I filed one for 70 people once, but now it's limited to 25 people. But absolutely, there are people who can't afford to pay the premium fee, but also can't afford to wait 7 to 9 months for adjudication just on the petition part and then go get their visa, or 7 to 9 months and then they get a request for evidence, which is a further delay. So you can file right now, you can file regular and then upgrade to premium. But it's a real chicken and egg situation where you can't work in the US without a visa, but you can't necessarily get a visa without showing work in the US. So it's hard for people who are touring, bands or singers, or DJs or whomever. They don't necessarily have all of the dates lined up. And then when they do line them up, they can't really guarantee because first they have to see if they can get this visa and then they can go perform. So it takes a lot of strategic planning, but it definitely is deterring some people because it's expensive.
I think you answered this question already, but just I'll repeat it anyways. Can O2 visa artists work without an attached O1 visa artist?
No.
Got it.
O2, the spirit of the O2 is that you're essential support to the O1 worker, and in the arts that you have a long-standing professional relationship, or in film and TV that you're required for continuity of the project. So in film and TV, you don't necessarily have to have this long-standing professional relationship where You can just be like, oh, we're filming between Canada and the US and we're going back and forth, and these makeup artists or these hairstylists need to come with the crew so that the hair and makeup for this character looks the same regardless of where we shoot.
Got it. Got a question on LinkedIn, and this one is getting pretty close to asking for very specific legal advice. So if you don't feel comfortable answering it, it's all good. But question is, if I'm on an H-1B visa and I want to maybe take a course from a community college related to film, can I do that?
I shouldn't answer that.
That's totally fair.
Yeah, you can message me and we can talk about it.
All right. And Jacki's contact information should be in everything that we're posting. So if you don't have it right now, check the page on LinkedIn, check the email that we're going to be sending out after, and you'll be able to get that directly. Got another question, pretty broad one. Given the current situation, how advisable is it to pursue an O1 visa transfer or to apply for a concurrent visa?
I've had no issues with that. You have to be able to show that you are, if you're in the US, that you're maintaining your current O1. Concurrent, I haven't really seen any issues. Yeah, it hasn't been a problem so far.
Cool.
I mean, here's the thing I just also want to make clear, because content creators are sort of jacks of all trade, and immigration visa petitions are very specific. So if we do an O1 petition for a content creator, and then they want to be a music producer or something totally different from their content creation, we have to be able to show that they're extraordinary in music production as well. If we've already argued that they're extraordinary in content creation and they want to do a concurrent content creation O1 with a new brand or something, that's fine. But if you're doing an entire different petition, you have to be able to show that they're extraordinary. So everybody wants to be sort of everything, but you have to, not all content creators are actors of extraordinary ability. It's not the same thing. So you have to be very careful about how you frame the work that the individual is doing and any sort of additional O1s that they are in line with what sort of makes them extraordinary.
Great. Well, I think that looks like it from the audience questions, and we are just about wrapping up, getting close to the end of this anyway. So with that, I just want to say, Jacki, thank you for joining us. All this information was incredibly valuable and insightful. I can tell you that I didn't know 99% of this and learned a lot today myself, and certainly will be coming to you with follow-up questions at some point, because you've raised a lot of really interesting issues. Again, if you would like to reach out to Jacki or even myself and Lorena, our information should be on the LinkedIn page. You can follow us. Weissman Law is a newsletter that you can go to our website to sign up for. I know Jacki has a great newsletter as well, which I highly recommend. Anyone who's ever interested in any of these types of issues, please sign up to. Would like to once more thank you very much, Jacki, for joining us today. Lorena, thanks as always for helping me put this together and organizing this.
Sure. You both.
Jacki, any final parting words before we hit close on this thing?
I would just say, I know like a lot of what you hear and even maybe some of what I talked about today sounds really like negative, but every day we're getting petition approvals. Every day our clients are coming in. Every day I see them on Instagram or on Variety or wherever, touting their achievements and their new projects. And it's really wonderful to see. And it's still a great place for creative production. And so I hope that people still encourage foreign nationals to come here to shoot and to work on projects and bring their unique talents to the US.
Great. Thank you. Again, if you want to rewatch this, we will be circulating the recorded link likely in early May. And on top of that, we'll have this hosted on YouTube sometime in the near future. We're going to continue doing these free webinars indefinitely as far as until we run out of topics and run out of interesting people to speak to. So please follow us if you haven't already. Keep an eye on our updates. We'll be announcing the next one in the next week or two. And we hope to see you all there. Take care and enjoy this very last day of April. Bye, everyone.
Bye.